Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this live stream on Newcastle United's defeat at Fulham yesterday, exactly 24 hours on from kickoff in that game at Craven Cottage. Newcastle were beaten 3-1 in West London, first defeat of the season, and it had been coming. I think that's absolutely fair to say, isn't it? It had been coming for a while. Just waiting for a few people to join the chat. Please do get into the comments once you arrive, and also like the stream once you are in, and we can get chatting and get going. But Newcastle United were beaten 3-1 at Craven Cottage yesterday, and as I say, it had been coming, hadn't it? Let's be fair. Newcastle were laborious, they were slow, they were lacking intensity, but that was the same for Wolves, that was the same for Bournemouth, that was the same for Tottenham, that was the same for Nottingham Forest at times. Certainly for Southampton in for a different reason, because obviously they went down to 10 man in that game, but it's getting a little bit worrisome, isn't it? And I think this one was the one where everything caught up with them. And Newcastle could have gone top with a win, which is quite remarkable when you consider everything that happened yesterday. And we'll go through once everyone's in the chat and once some people are starting to join what happened. But yeah, Newcastle were really poor and deserved everything that they got, which was exactly nothing. So yeah, please do jump in the chat. Hi Craig, I think you're the first one in, so please do. What did you think of the game? Let me know what you thought of the game, Craig, as you're the first person to be in the chat. What are Newcastle going to do for next week, for next week against Wimbledon? I think it's on Tuesday, and then Manchester City next Saturday. It's problems throughout the team. Where to start? Exactly, Craig. I think that's it. For me, I would start in the midfield. My thing last week was not starting Tonali, and my thing this week is again not starting Sandro Tonali. I think for me, it's one thing to you could perceivedly think of some reasons why it didn't work out against. Why he didn't start against Wolves? Sorry, because he just they were managing his minutes. It was the first game after the international break, I think, and he played 2 games for Italy. Obviously, you've got to manage him a little bit. That made sense as an excuse for not starting him against Wolves, and then he played half a game. But not to start him in this game and to play him for only 15 minutes was for me was ridiculous. I couldn't understand the logic behind that, and everybody I've spoken to since can't understand the logic behind that either, especially when you don't start Sean Long. So the midfield balance was really off. Those 3 players, Joelinton, Joe Willock, and Bruno Guimaraes, are brilliant players, and they have played well together in the past, but I think they're far too open as a 3 is the issue. For me, I think this is a team that doesn't quite know its identity, but actually I think there's a mentality issue as well in terms of playing away from home. Joelinton and Willock are 2 brilliant players, but they seem to be only really, really excellent at St James's Park. They don't seem to be able to find their way forward in terms of away performances. We'll get to Bruno in a second because I know that you've just mentioned that. I'll read the comment now. Craig says Bruno isn't a captain, isn't a leader, isn't an organizer. Joelinton is off, maybe carrying an injury. Bruno's been poor all season too. Wants too much time on the ball and causing himself problems. I think there's a general thing with Bruno where, as I say, you say his performance hasn't been right all season. He hasn't been at his best throughout the campaign, has he? And there's got to be a bit of an issue there. Generally, what it is, because the thing that I think is really worrying, not just Joelinton, sorry, not just Bruno, but Joelinton and the others as well, is it's inexplicable. Like at the moment, this shouldn't be where Newcastle are. They should be playing with more verve, playing with more intensity, playing with more of an identity. And the irony is that was their identity. Intensity was their identity. That's what they said 2 years ago when they were in the Champions League. There's none of that in any of these games so far, and it stems from that midfield. And I think at the moment I can understand the sort of the question of Bruno being a captain and all that sort of thing. I think it's a little bit a little bit debatable as to whether that's the issue. I think it seems to be more general than that for me, but there's a sense I just don't. I just think it stemmed again from the midfield battle and midfield setup for Newcastle, and there will be a deeper dive on the channel tomorrow where I'll pick as I did last week. I'll pick a tactical element to the game and where I think Newcastle went right and wrong, and it'll be again very wrong in that video tomorrow. So do check that out if you haven't if you want to see that. But Craig's also come back and said, I don't like Isak and Barnes in the same team. Neither works hard for the team without possession. We're effectively carrying to any sacrifices Hall and plays Kelly as cover for Barnes. I think there was a question mark over Isak yesterday, and I'm surprised, to be honest, that Isak played in that game because of the way that he. The report came out during the week from Craig Hope that he wasn't fit, and he obviously came off half time against Wolves. So there was two issues, and we know with Isak that he isn't particularly impactful when he's not at his very, very best in peak condition, and he wasn't in peak condition yesterday. But I agree, he was a passenger. Barnes scored a goal, and he is the only player that seems to be making that impact in that way. He's obviously 3 goals in a row, but I think for me it's deeper than individual issues. It's a mentality thing, as I said at the top. I think the team doesn't know what its system is, what its approach is. It's got one system, 4-3-3. It doesn't really change from that, but it's no longer the intense team that they were 2 years ago. It's no longer but it's also not good in possession. They don't really attack out wide anymore so much. To try and cut inside all the time and make the pitch narrow. It doesn't work. It's very easy to manage and easy to play against. And again, that hitting that space behind the midfield and in front of the defense, it still hit. It hits every time. The passing is disgraceful. I really appreciate you being the only one in the chat at the moment, by the way, Craig. I need to be better at organising when I'm going to. I was coming back from my from a family party yesterday, so this morning, so I didn't have time to set the live up until late. So lots of people probably aren't aware that it's on, but yeah, I think the passing, everything is just. I think it's stemming from an intensity thing, but also then everything else falls behind that from there on. The passing, they can't string two passes together. I think you're absolutely right. But where does the sense of the thing that's worrying me is there's not a sense that it can get better. It doesn't feel like it's an obvious fix in terms of there's lots of these little things that you've said. I agree on your Joelinton point. I agree that Bruno hasn't been great. I agree that the passing and the intensity, like these are all like you could pick so many different things from this game and from the previous games that for me make it really worrying that it's not going to get any better. And it feels like there's something seriously wrong in a deep way, I think, because I understand the sort of idea of yes, you can be I understand, sorry, that yes, you can you can. It's great that they've played poorly and won games, but I think that is good in a string of like a few games when they've played well previously, and then they go back to playing well. So this is your base level is playing well, whereas actually there's not much evidence to suggest that their base level is playing well at the moment, and that's what I think is quite concerning. Let me know in the comments. There's a couple more of you in as well. What you think? Also, please do like the stream, and yeah, let's keep the chat going. I think, and actually, a good question for anyone out there that is watching. Do you think this is just an isolated thing? Do you agree with me? Do you think that this is going to get better? Do you think Eddie Howe is still the man? I mean, are we at the stage where we should be? I don't want to make it clear that I'm not suggesting he isn't the man for the job, but do we get to the point where we think it's got to be considered whether he is, and what the because the thing, as I say, the worrying thing is that these things are happening all the time. They're no longer intense. They no longer play with intensity. They're no longer scare teams. They're very easy to play against. It's still, and the trouble is, it reminded me so much yesterday of a performance away from home last season when they were coming off the back of Champions League football and they were playing, and they were having to manage that, and the injuries were piling up and all the problems that stem from that. All of that didn't really come into play. I didn't think. Sorry, all of that was there yesterday, but there was none of the reason for that. There was none of the excuses for it. So why is it that this team is playing like it is? The worrying thing for me is I can't really put my finger on it. So if you got any suggestions, let me know what you think. And do you think that Eddie Howe is should not again? I think there's a difference between suggesting that Eddie Howe should be sacked, but questioning whether he is. I think he is the right man to go forward, and questioning whether the direction of the club in general is. Are we at that stage? Are you at that stage? The reason why I feel like I am is because this has been a turbulent summer from pretty much the get-go, hasn't it? Like if you think about the Staveley leaving and all the things, the interview in Germany with Eddie Howe after Paul Mitchell came in, the upset up apple cart, all the issues with the transfer window, this off the back of all that really doesn't help. There's something off at the moment, says Craig. Usually run through walls for the players. Usually run through walls for how on the pitch they all seem like they're waiting for each other to do something. I think that's a really good point. It feels like nobody's sort of taking the thing by the scruff of the neck and trying to change it. I think, and I don't think there were many positives from yesterday, but the thing that came from yesterday was there was a better second half performance. There was a better second half performance from the moment that Eddie Howe changed the system, and we'll get into that in a second because I do have a point about that as well. But the performance was better second half, and there were chances. There was enough chances created in that second half to get back into the game. There was obviously that gilt-edged chance that I still can't believe that Fabian Schär missed. He should have just squared it to Isak, and it's 2-2. But ultimately, Newcastle didn't deserve to win the game. And to your point, Craig, about Howe being off, I think there is a sort of weight that's been put on the team, put on the club at the moment that hasn't been there since the takeover. And this is a really challenging time. And as I say, I think the thing about this season generally was it was supposed to be the time when everything was back to normal. This was the time where they could galvanise, and there was no European football, to inverted commas, distract them. There was an opportunity to push on and go and get some more to go and get some good players in, and really push on and make a go of this season. And the only positive really is that the fact that they got 10 points and they're 6th or 7th at the moment after 5 games, which is obviously really, really good, a really, really good return. But it's the thing is that I keep saying is that it just doesn't feel like there's a reason why they're talking, why they are the way they are. Like, I worried in the summer when they didn't sign someone, and I think that it's really important to say that not signing a player, a big player, to sort of galvanize the team, give somebody something else, give the team something else, improve a position as well. Not doing that is not just detrimental to the quality of the squad, but it also sends a poor message to the existing players that that the team isn't moving forward. You have to. I think the thing about football at the highest levels, if you're not moving forward, if you're standing still, you're moving backwards. I think that is the way that Newcastle look at the moment. They look like they've stood still from a position where they finished outside of the mainstream European places. Obviously, the first team in 10 years. So it's quite unlucky that in the fact that Man United won the FA Cup, so they're not in Europe. But they finished 7th when really that team was good enough to finish above. Obviously, they've had those issues, but they're not. The point I'm trying to make is they weren't strengthening from a position of strength. They weren't looking. They weren't building from a good position. They've rested on that position while other teams are strengthening. You look at Brighton earlier, today. Now I don't know what the score is now. But they were winning when I last checked. They look better than they did last season with Minter and going into there, and those other players. Adingra's getting better. Fabian Herzler's done a really good job there. Manchester United are always going to be a threat, no matter how poor they can look. They always seem to have the ability to be in that race. Chelsea look really good at the moment. Villa at the moment, you will see how the Champions League really impacts them later down the line as it did with Newcastle. But they look good. But Tottenham are going to be a good side. Obviously, they've got Dom Solanke, and now he's up front. All of these other teams have strengthened. Newcastle stood still, and that doesn't send a good message of momentum and building. And that's what Newcastle lack. As I said, they don't have any momentum at the moment. They don't have anything to grab onto and really build from. Because the results have been quite. Lucky is a strong word, but they've not been great. The performances, the results have been haven't come from good performances. So there's very little to grab onto, and that's why it felt like yesterday was coming. I am rambling a little bit. Hopefully, a few more people will join. This is the issue with me just jumping on at 3:00 in the afternoon, hoping that anyone is around to talk about Newcastle United. But I really appreciate those of you who are. If you are into the live stream and you haven't already, please do drop a like on the stream and share it if you haven't. And if you haven't already as well, subscribe to the channel. That would be really helpful. Lots more content coming up in the next few weeks. More match reviews, more previews, more tactical analysis as well, and some other non-Newcastle United football stuff as well that I've got in the pipeline. More on that to come later. Who would be my starting 11 for Wednesday, says Craig. Craig, you're doing so much heavy lifting in this live. I really appreciate it. It's really, really good. My starting 11, I think obviously Tonali should start, but then again, I would have started him for the league games. I think you would imagine that you can play a fairly strong side and get through against Wimbledon, without having to play your best players. I don't think Isak will play, for example. Will Asula should start up front. I think there needs to be a balance between the, who starts and who comes in. I think people like Lewis Hall will probably start. I'd imagine that Pope will stay in goal because just the trust level that I think isn't there for anybody else. Like Dubravka, he could come in, but I think Eddie Howe lost a little bit of trust in him. So Pope playing in goal is most likely, I would say. Hall maybe at left back. The centre backs at this stage with so few options probably pit themselves. Is it Kelly or Byrne with Cher or Kraft? Maybe if Kraft's fit, you have to remind me who's fit. Livramento probably starts at right back with Trippier seemingly now back in the number one spot. Depends what happens, obviously, against Manchester City at the weekend as well, with that game in mind. Tonali, I think, will start in midfield. Longstaff as well. Asula will likely start too. So there should be enough quality in this team, I think, to get through this game against Wimbledon, regardless of who really plays. Obviously, within reason, they've got enough quality. I think they'll probably rest Bruno, Gordon, and Barnes. Sorry, and Isak, possibly Barnes as well. But Almiron and Murphy out wide could be quite good. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's been a difficult start to the season, hasn't it? I think that's the way I would look at it. Newcastle, Willock is. I keep forgetting about Willock. I'd start Asula for sure, and Sanusi would be interesting to see if he would. I think for me, I think the starting the young lads at this stage is quite a risky thing. I think there's enough players, as I mentioned, to rest a few key ones like Bruno and like Isak without weakening the squad too much. I think Asula, if he doesn't start in this game, then when is he going to start? And Tonali, I think it'd just be great to see him back on the football pitch again. Obviously, he played against Nottingham Forest. I think he's a little bit better. He should be in better shape. That was a month ago. He should now be in better shape. So you'd hope that was gonna improve in terms of his performance and his longevity for this game. But yeah, coming back off the Fulham game, let's talk a little bit about the 3 goals. Then the first one, it's for me. I can't believe Raul Jimenez is allowed to turn in the box in the form he's in. I can't remember the stats at the moment, but he looks like he's sort of at the best he's been since he was at his height at Wolves. You allow him to turn and get a shot away. It's you're always asking for trouble. Then I think it's Smith Rowe, isn't it? Again, remind me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Smith Rowe. That's all Nick Pope with that poor error, and then Bruno for the third goal. That pass straight into the player's path, and it's 3-1. But they all stemmed from pretty poor errors, I thought, and that's what I mean about mentality. That's what I mean about the issue with where I see Newcastle it being a deeper problem, because Newcastle are not in a position where they're not in a position to build on anything. They're not playing with great confidence. They're not looking like they're ready to go for anything. They're not ready for attacking teams like they were 2 years ago. That was the contrast between this team and that team is when it's the same players, and maybe that's part of the thing about making it stale in the squad with no transfers. Perhaps, I don't know, but there's just something quite bad, quite wrong, I think, and I don't. And ultimately, I don't really know what the answer is, because I think that, as I say, it's not a tactical thing. I think you can point, and I think it's a fair point that midfield balance wasn't right away from home. There was no real holding midfield. It parted like the Red Sea far too much across the game. And when you've got Willock and Joe Linton and Bruno, it's unlikely that you're gonna have that. I mean, let me know in the chat if you think Newcastle missed Longstaff yesterday. There was a lot of people saying that perhaps it was a great afternoon for people to see what Longstaff offers the team and what Longstaff can bring, because he hasn't had the chance to bring anything. He hasn't brought much this season, and he struggled a lot this season. And I was criticised him, but the team looked a lot looser without him. It looks a lot easier to break down without him, and that's not necessarily a Longstaff thing. That's a more defensive minded player, a more sort of a player to bring in a little bit more, to knit everything together a bit more, which is what Tonali would bring. So without one of those two and the other 3 midfielders, and there's nobody to really knit it all together in terms of keeping things solid. Bruno always looks to pass the ball forward and get involved higher up the pitch. Willock is there to get through the lines and really play with energy and pace and power, is Joe Linton's thing. It's all about going forward, and that meant that Fulham had space in behind. So tactically, that's the question I'd have. But actually, I think, as I said earlier, it's a mentality issue, this one, for me. The team looks like it doesn't know what it wants to do. It looks like it doesn't quite therefore doesn't then know, what doesn't look like it can fully commit to anything. I agree with what Craig said earlier, and thanks so much for all of your comments, Craig. As I say, there's a few more of you in the live now. Please do like the stream if you haven't already. But when the mentality and the efficiency and the intensity aren't there, you get players being being passengers, and that front three in that first half was non-existent, and maybe that was something to do with Isak not being fully fit. And I said in my video previewing this game, I would have gone with the Sula if he wasn't fit, and I'm not convinced he was. And I'm quite disappointed in a way that he played in that game, because I know Eddie Howe said he was fully fit before the game, but I thought the biggest issue last season with Isak was, and why he lots of people said that they worry he's injury prone. He's not injury prone in my opinion. Last season was a bit of an anomaly because he kept coming back at 70% fit, and then getting in and breaking down again and coming back, in a vicious cycle. And that vicious cycle is it looked like it re-entered again yesterday. It looked like he was coming into this game not fit, and then it was a passenger as a partial result of that, but also, as I say, the tactical thing as well, and the mentality thing. All of it was just off. And the worst thing for me is that this was coming off the back of performances that were very similar, but just with better results, which maybe masked the issue. Because I know that the fan base has been a little bit split in the sense of in the sense of it's been a little bit split in the sense that some fans think it's fine that the team's playing well. I've had a few comments in the bottom of my video saying that the team's got good results. What does the performance matter? Ultimately, the performance matters because you want to believe that it's possible to progress further and to carry on and continue in that vein. Whereas it just felt like that result was coming for a long time. Right back to the start of the season. And what's really ironic is I was at the Cellar Cup the weekend before the season, and they ripped Girona apart and played really well against Brest as well. Two teams that are in the Champions League this season, and they looked fresh. They looked intense. And yes, it's only a friendly, but why is it that they were doing that then and not now? What's the problem? Craig says our centre backs don't read the game like Botman and are nowhere near his level. Yeah, that's the problem. I think they are missing Botman, but I think that there's a recruitment question in there, which is that why have they not been able to go out and find more players in different markets that are like Botman? Because if Botman is, if I agree, but he cost Newcastle 32 million and came from Lille in France. It wasn't like he was difficult to. It isn't like he was a gem that Newcastle. It wasn't that like he's a really expensive, really sort of big, bold signing that Newcastle were lucky to make. He was a great signing, but he's the type of signing they should have been making this summer for precisely that reason. They haven't done that, and that is perhaps why I'm a little bit questioning whether Eddie. We know that the club doesn't seem to be, the board in terms of Mitchell and Howe don't quite seem to be on the same page, and that's maybe what I question. Is I said on my transfer reaction video that Newcastle needed to do more in the transfer market. They needed to spread their wings a little bit, look a little bit further afield, take some risks, look at other markets, because it seems like Newcastle, in their current guys, only want Premier League proven players, which cost a lot of money and are difficult to and are therefore difficult to afford, and also you don't get much value in it. That's why the Gahey situation reared its head like it did. So I completely agree with what you were saying about Botman. You've just come back, Craig, and said Gay wouldn't be the guy. For me, doesn't seem like an elite level defender. 70 million is steep. Yeah, I think he's not proven himself to be 70 million, but it's not even about Gahey and whether he's the right man. At 70 million, I tend to agree. I think he would improve the team, but it's about the premium and the fact that it's about the premium you have to pay, but also the fact that Crystal Palace are in a position where they didn't have to sell him this summer. They've probably calculated that they might sell him next summer for a lesser price, and the drop off in difference of the price is probably worth what they get for a year out of him. That's probably the calculation that they've made. And Newcastle should have been okay. Well, we'll go on to Malik Thiaw, or we'll go on to various other defenders that they had on that they were linked with. They looked at Edmund Tapsoba, who would have been ideal, and he was supposed to be cheaper than than Gahey. If that was the case, why didn't they look at him earlier? This is the Fulham reaction, but the point, I think this is a really, really interesting point, that it's like all of the issues have come to a head now because they finally lost a game, and tactically they were all over the shop in midfield. As I say, the defense isn't quick enough, lacking that sort of recovery pace that was evident with the Wolves goal last week as well. Far too much room in front of the defense, behind the midfield as well. Still an issue. They're no longer winning the game in the midfield and dominating the midfield and overrunning teams there, and that doesn't allow their front three to affect the game. So they're tactically just not there. And then on top of that, their mentality is an issue. And on top of that, we've got all these issues in the transfer market. That's why I think that this is a little bit concerning. But I really appreciate your comments, Craig. I really appreciate your thoughts on this. And I think lots of people hopefully are going to watch this back and hopefully you agree with the points I'm making. There will be, as I say, a video, whether it's tomorrow or later today, probably tomorrow. There will be another video on the channel with a little bit more coherent thought. I'm just really sort of here to interact with you guys today and sort of see what you guys thought of the game and what you think of where Newcastle go from here. I mean, do you still? I'll re-ask the question again. What do you think about where Newcastle find themselves in terms of where, has this start affected what you think of the season as a whole, and where you think Newcastle can go this season? Has that changed in the last few games? Do you have trust in the team and the club and Eddie Howe to move the team forward? Craig, do you see us spending in January? I think they have to spend in January, and because and that's why I would have spent in the summer, because I think that we've heard so much, and it is true that the January window is difficult to navigate because teams are less open to selling. There's a risk to selling, which is probably greater in January than it is than it is the summer, because that can lose teams momentum at a key part of the season. So I think that's how I would view it. That's how I would have viewed it. I would have spent in the summer to avoid trying to spend in January and made the team as strong as I could then. And if you need to, and if you can, then look at the opportunities in January. January is a very opportunistic window. That's evidenced by the fact that Newcastle went and signed Anthony Gordon, a very opportunistic thing in 2023. So I think that they will spend in January, but it's almost that they're in a position where they have something to where they need to strengthen. There's a need to spend in January. I think that's a very difficult place to be in. So the pressure's on in that regard, and everybody knows that they've got some money to spend. And just further in that sort of whole thing about why I feel like that there's a worry about the team going forward is because it's a team. The club, tried to put this idea that they weren't panicking in the summer window out, and then bid £50 million for Anthony Elanga on the last day of the window. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that you're not panicking and then go and throw bids for players that you weren't in sort of seeing and thinking that you're interested in. So I think for me, there's a real sense of some real serious questions need to be asked here, and I would imagine that going forward, that it'll need to check something big will have to change, either in the dynamic between Howe and Mitchell or on the pitch, in terms of why are they not as intense. I think that's a key question that Eddie Howe needs to be asked, is why are they lacking intensity? What is it deliberate? Because last season there was a sort of sense that they were trying to move away from the intensity thing because of the number of games they had, because of the fact that they were going to go and play against better opposition and it might be more difficult to do that. They wanted to be a bit more solid in midfield and therefore solid as a team. But the irony about this whole thing is that they haven't been better defensively when they were really going for teams and really going and playing with such intensity and energy. That was the best that they've ever played under Eddie Howe. That was the way that he set that team up really looked. It looked really good. Whereas now, it just doesn't have that same identity, and there's no obvious reason for it. I don't fully understand. So to answer your question, Craig, I do see Newcastle spending in January, but I think it's an issue because they have to, rather than. I like to think of January as a window you enter. It's never good if you're having to spend in January. I think the last time I've seen Newcastle in that position was the January where they signed Bruno and Trippier. There was an element of opportunity in there as well because of the money that they had to spend, but they desperately needed to do it, and it wasn't a great. It felt like that saved the season, but you don't want to be in a position where a window's saving your season, because if you get it wrong, then the consequences could be huge, and that's a real issue, I think. I'm going to wait for a few more people to see if a few more people come into the live. If you've got any other thoughts, then drop them in. But if not, other people aren't going to likely to join, then we might pull it a little bit early. But yeah, please do. If you've got any more thoughts on the game, drop them in the comment section. Like the live stream as well, and subscribe. Please subscribe. And for more content, as I say, on Monday there will be a video where I sort of talk a bit more coherently with a few more thoughts and a bit slower and a bit more thoughtfully, on Saturday's game before the Wimbledon game. That will probably combine as a preview for the Wimbledon game as well. I'm not sure there's enough time for me to upload 2 videos before Tuesday. Then there will be another immediate instant reaction live stream on Tuesday evening to the Wimbledon game. Hopefully Newcastle will have got through to the 4th round of the Carabao Cup, because those cup competitions are really, I think, where the season could be defined. The team doesn't look like it's capable of really challenging for the Champions League, and then after that, what happens? I think really something's got to give this season in terms of a cup competition. Getting to a final, getting to the latter stages, they've got to take this seriously. They've got a decent draw against Wimbledon. They've got to push through that. If they come through that, then they can hopefully build. But it doesn't look like they're in a position to get anywhere near the Champions League off the back of these opening performances. Admittedly, things can change, but at every other point we've been saying things will change when X player comes back from injuries, when the games slow down and there's more chance to get on the training pitch, when this tactical change happens. Whereas Eddie Howe should really theoretically have the team exactly where he wants it, with the exception of missing Sven Botman, who he's going to be without till January. So if he's going to be focusing on that, then he's going to be complaining for quite a while, because that just can't change. So I feel like there's got to be something that gives. And I think that I don't know what it is. That's my big worry, is that this is kind of difficult to explain. Why are they at this stage when they were supposed to be rebuilding and going again and finding the momentum? That Pep Guardiola quote from the start of the season: Newcastle will be the team from 2 years ago. They haven't looked like that once throughout the season, and that's a real concern. So please do, as I say, let me know what you think below about this, about any other thoughts on the game, any other thoughts on the season, any other thoughts about where Newcastle go. To the point actually earlier that Craig made about Bruno and whether he's captain material. I'm going to hold off on judgment about Bruno's captain, because I think it's too soon, and I also think that not everything is worthy of analysis, in the sense that I don't think him being captain was the reason why he performed so poorly yesterday. I don't think it's the reason why he's been performing so poorly. I think this is just often the way it is with when Newcastle play poorly. It tends to be that it stems from him. When they play well, it stems from him. He is such a vital player for the team that however he plays will have a direct impact on how Newcastle play. And the fact that he's had a difficult start to the season isn't able to knit that midfield together and make it tick in the way he has done in previous, obviously in so many games that we know that he can, and the way that we know that he can. I think that's having a massive impact. But also, I think there's a little concern that that there isn't this, that he hasn't had this ability he hasn't had this chance really to develop this relationship with Sandro Tonali. That I said last season before the Tonali's ban that it was actually working out a little bit. It was starting to look good. It was starting to develop. They were starting to have an understanding. Then the ban came, and it's all gone a little bit back to square one in terms of that. So I think Tonali is at least giving Tonali a run out is the answer to where Newcastle are going wrong with their issue with their in terms of their midfield. And as soon as they find a way forward, and I think Tonali is, as I say, the way forward, then hopefully the attack can get back into it. Are you concerned about Anthony Gordon, by the way? And Anthony Gordon's lots of talk after the game about Anthony Gordon's body language and his performances and the fact that he isn't playing well. Are you concerned? Do you think it's bigger than maybe just his a poor form, or maybe the fact that he's come back late from for pre-season? He's had obviously such a busy year and a bit with the under-21 Euros, the senior Euros, obviously playing so many games last season. Are all of those things factors, or do you think it is a bit more sinister than that in terms of Gordon and why Gordon isn't playing well? Let me know in the comment section if you have any thoughts on that. But if not, then we might look at wrapping this up in the next 5-10 minutes if more people don't join. As I say, I really need to be better at organising these live streams. I'm going to put out now. I'm going to make the link for the post Wimbledon live tonight, so hopefully more people can see it and just join straight after the full-time whistle, when I will be talking about the game against Wimbledon. But first, tomorrow there will be a reaction video, deeper dive video like there was last week, looking at where Newcastle went wrong at Craven Cottage and why it's been so difficult. But yeah, I think that I think that this is quite an alarming result, because yes, it's the first defeat of the season, and obviously on paper it looks good. They're still in the top half. They're still very much. It's still it's been the best start to a season since 1995. But ultimately, this is I think a sense. There's a sense of something isn't right behind the scenes, and it's easy to say it's Paul Mitchell. It's easy to say this, that, and the other, but how much will that really affect the players, and crucially the way that the team is playing, and why aren't it's more a mentality and a tactical thing on the training pitch, on the pitch that are concerning me at the moment. The fact that there's no intensity, and the fact that they don't seem to be able to get themselves up for games when they're under a bit of pressure anymore. They're not a very robust team. This is a Newcastle team that's got hallmarks of the very worst of the Ashley eras. They're obviously a better team. They've got better players, but that was a performance that you could have picked out of the lowest part of Alan Pardew's reign, the lowest part of Steve McLaren's reign, the lowest part of Steve Bruce's reign as well. That they were making similar mistakes. No pressure on the ball. No intensity. No presence in the midfield. And as I say, it was a very poor performance overall, and a real concern. But yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up there, because no one else seems to be dropping into the live. Thanks so much for joining me, and thanks, Craig, for all your comments as well. Really appreciate that. Please do like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're watching this on back as well, as I say, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back on Monday with a bigger deep dive into how Newcastle have played in this game, and where they went wrong, and why things are not quite right with Newcastle at the moment. Thanks so much. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.